Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Third Impact Anime Podcast. On this episode, we are going to be talking about the recently released theatrical film directed by Masaaki Yuasa, INU-OH. I think this is actually the first theatrical Yuasa that we're talking about on this podcast, which in hindsight is kind of a shame. I know we talked about Devilman Crybaby way back. We talked about Kaiba somewhat recently. I say recently, that's like 2 years ago at this point. But anyway, we're talking about INU-OH on this episode. My name is Austin. Hello. And I am joined by three fantastic co-hosts to join me on this musical journey. Who do I have with me this evening?
You have me, Bill. I was really excited for this Bridge concert, but those Ticketmaster prices, why are they so expensive? It's on a bridge. Those scalpers, it's on a bridge. They shouldn't be charging that much. I have to stand to see the concert. There's no seating. So I don't get why Ticketmaster is charging so much for these bridge tickets.
And it's feudal Japan, so there is no PA system.
Exactly. It's a highway robbery here.
Tori here, and I'm here to play my Biwa on the bridge for the masses.
And charge Bill an exorbitant price.
And I'm the artist formerly known as Tobias, but I'm going by Tobi Ichi nowadays.
Tobiare later down the line.
Yeah, we'll see.
If you're feeling it. But yes, on this episode, we're talking about INU-OH, a movie I think we all enjoyed to some extent. And we're super excited to talk about that. But first, sort of before we get into that, we did want to have a brief discussion about a convention that we attended somewhat recently. About 3 weeks ago, from the time of this recording, we attended Queen City Anime Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. They were kind enough to bring us out to be featured panelists for them, so we appreciate that. And I guess, just generally speaking, let's just talk about how the con went. I mean, for me, I had a good time. I had a lot of panels to do, both of my own and collaboration panels with Tobias and Tori, which we can talk about. But I think probably the coolest thing that I got to do throughout the weekend is that I was able to moderate some of the Q&As for some of the voice actor guests. I was able to sit down and have a interview time with a couple of people who are people that I knew beforehand, people I was fans of, and then some people that I had to do some research on before. But it was really cool to be able to sit down and talk with some cool voice talent and some people that have done not only voice acting, but also ADR script writing and dubbing production and things like that. Well, I really enjoyed all of my conversations, but I really especially enjoyed talking to Tiana Camacho, who is the voice of Hermes in Stone Ocean, and you guys know that I'm a big JoJo's fan, so getting to talk to her was really cool. I also got to sit down and talk with Matt Shipman and Brittany Lauda, who own the small dubbing studio Kocha Sound, and they worked a lot on Akudama Drive, they worked on Skate the Infinity, and a bunch of other productions for Netflix and Funimation, and Brittany Lauda is the voice of FF in Stone Ocean, so I got a double helping of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure voice actors. And I talked to some other folks, but maybe I'll talk about that shortly. I don't want to monopolize all of our time, so let's toss it over to Tobias. What was your general take of your convention experience?
Yeah, so this has been the first con I've been back to since the start of the pandemic. So it was both trying to enjoy Queen City, which has always been kind of a smaller, low-key event, but also be a little careful because I'm still one of those people still wearing masks, still trying to social distance whenever possible, limit my time in public around crowds. However, over the past year, and the past couple months, there have been a number of success stories with cons, in particular the ones that are requiring full vaccination and masking, which Queen City was one of. I'm very happy to say. And as far as I know, there's been no spreader event at all. None of us contracted COVID. The few times we walked around, they were enforcing the mask usage. all throughout. So very, very happy to see that all weekend. That being said, I still did limit my time in the public spaces. I think I spent more time in the hotel room this year than I have in years prior, just to limit that exposure in general. Very least it came back positive. Or rather, I didn't come back positive, which is the positive, I guess I'm trying to say.
Be careful about your wording there, friend.
Exactly. So I did just a trio of panels here this weekend. I debuted a brand new one about the Star Wars Visions anthology series that Disney put out last year. That was kind of fun. I was a fan of a lot of the studios that they worked with to make that, so it was really fun to both research that and share all the fruits of my research with the 10 people that were there Friday morning.
You basically opened the convention with that panel, and you did it sitting on a couch without a table.
Yeah, strangely enough, like they put me in the big room and they had like a GDQ style like couch, the couch and a couple of chairs, kind of a discussion panel, which is a lot different than the tables that we're used to. So
that's where I did my Q&A panels, just for reference. I guess that's probably why they had it set up that way for the voice actor Q&As, which don't need a table, but still it was kind of weird for panels.
Yeah, I think I just got shoved in there because it was the first thing. All of our other panels were in one of the more regular style rooms. But yeah, it was kind of neat. It was kind of weird to have a lounge chair with my laptop in my lap with all the wires hanging off of it. But it worked out really well. The panel, a little worried about it because it was brand new, but worked out pretty well. I had too much information, so I had to cut it down, as I presented it, which is a better outcome than the alternative, I think, in general. But I went on to present a new version of my Beyond Miyazaki, Anime Creators You Should Know.
A Tobias classic.
Yeah, a sort of a clickbaity style panel, get people in the doors when they see the word Miyazaki. We really talk about other people in general. So just in general, kind of the same, but I added both Osamu Dezaki and Hideaki Anno this time around, cleaned up some of the studio talk I've done previously, just to give it a little bit of a fresh face. The last time I presented this same panel at Queen City, I was in the hallway because I got overbooked for the room. So just because there were like 20 people that still wanted to see my panel, I just said, screw it, we're going to do this in the hallway. I just kind of stood up, no microphone, as loud as I could project my voice talking about these people. And that was a memorable experience, kind of fun for what it was.
I'm reminded of the term we coined quite a many years ago, guerrilla paneling.
Guerrilla paneling, yep. I think that's kind of where we started it, right? I kind of started it with doing that. But yeah, then we closed off. Then not only did I open the entire convention with Star Wars Visions, I closed the convention with Anime of the Quarantine Era, a overview of the stuff that had come out, as well as a lot of the news that had come out in the anime industry since March 2020. A lot of series to cover, a lot of news, corporate acquisition sort of news to go over, and we filled those 2 hours we had. Could have easily gone into 3 if that was a thing we could do. But yeah, a lot of fun. Glad to be back. I haven't sat and talked about anime as much as I should in the past 2 years, whether in person or on podcasts. So it's good to be back.
Well, good. I'm glad that you were able to do some cool panels and to breathe some fresh life into some old content, because that's always pretty fulfilling. But Tori, you had a very different experience than us, because you were not so awash in having to provide content. So what was your Queen City like this year?
Oh yeah, sure. So I didn't think I could go, so I didn't submit anything. I sat in on the 2012 panel and mostly just sat in on panels in general. I got a really nice nap on Saturday early evening. Never get to do that at cons because I'm always busy. And that was basically it. I just kind of vibed the whole weekend, so it was fine.
Yep. No, it's nice to, I mean, I wouldn't know. I'm only speaking from, secondhand perspective, but I hear it's nice when you're not running yourself ragged at a convention, having to do hours and hours of programming, especially like a 4-hour block of programming in a 5-hour period. I wouldn't know anyone that had to do that specifically.
Who would have thunk it?
No.
Who would have thunk
I
it?
had no idea what to do with myself. It was very weird, especially at a smaller con where there's not a lot going on in one given moment. So I don't know. Like I said, I just vibed. It was fine.
Would you have a preference? Would you rather have been more busy?
It was kind of nice to not be, especially after Animazement, doing all that stuff for them. So, it was kind of nice, but I wish I at least had like one or two more panels to do, I think.
Well, it was nice to have you on the 2012 panel because we did that in Animazement as well, and I think we talked about it on that episode. But it was basically like, hey, it's been 10 years since 2012. Look at all these cool things that came out that year. And we were able to rope Tobias in to do this iteration, and we added a couple of things like Humanity Has Declined, which Tobias is very into. And people seem to love that clip that we played, so I'm really glad that you put a bug in my ear to make sure we talked about that show in the 2012 panel. So thanks for that.
Yeah, it's a lot of silly fun.
Yep, that was a fun panel that all four of us did together. But Bill, how was your convention experience?
Pretty solid for the most part. I did my anime anthologies panel, which I thought went pretty well. The amount of video I had in there did not buckle. The PowerPoint survived, so that was a good. I had a decent crowd, so I was pretty happy with that. Talking a lot about movies like the Genius Party movies and memories, which are always solid and always enjoyable to talk about. And I was kind of along for the ride with the 2012 and the quarantine panel, which was fun. I think what I enjoyed about the con the most was just kind of hanging out, where whether that was playing like the new Mario Kart tracks with Tobias, or going to that really cool ramen restaurant Friday night.
Oh yeah,
that was really good, and learning about that amazing table flip game in the arcade, where basically you have a table and you're just waiting for the exact perfect moment to flip it over and get the most points. It was amazing. It was a revelation.
Spending time in the arcade was probably the thing that I wanted to do the most that I didn't get a chance to do, which is, a bummer for me.
They had some cool cabinets. Like, they had a really cool Gundam cabinet where it was 2v2 versus. You could pick any Gundam pilot from any of the franchise. And what was cool was they would have the two cabinets side by side, and then in the middle was a TV that was showing the battle as it was going on. And so I just thought from a cabinet design perspective, it looked pretty cool. So
I will say I did do something that was a first for me, and I still don't really know what to do with it. I bought an anime peaker. But I don't know what I'm going to do with it because I don't really want to put it on my car.
Yeah, you can put it in the garbage.
Well, it's Anya from Spy Family. Why would I do that? That's so mean. It's her heh face.
Heh. I mean, based on the amount of peakers we saw around the con parking lot, it was either a Demon Slayer one, Spy Family, or some random thing I didn't know. So, but Demon Slayer was probably the most popular one that I saw. So.
Well, that random thing that you don't know is more than likely Genshin Impact, the most popular anime at the convention.
Yeah, the ranking of the cosplayers, it was Genshin Impact, which confounded Tobias, which was funny. Demon Slayer was in the hunt at the number 2 spot, and then probably like a third was Spy Family. Like, I saw a lot of yours cosplays.
Hearing reports out of Otakon, it sounded like the bigger cons, Yor was far and away the winner of cosplay. Surprised that Genshin was easily the far and away the winner here. Whenever you saw somebody with just a nondescript kimono and whatever, it's definitely a Genshin character.
Well, I think
probably because the fan base trend's pretty young, and that con draws. I was going to say unfortunately, but that wasn't the
Wow.
word I wanted to use. Queen City draws in a lot of a younger crowd, and Genshin is absolutely very popular with the tweens right now.
Mhm.
So that probably had a lot to do with it.
And the added fact that a considerable I think every guest that they had was in Genshin Impact in some form or fashion. Some of them having played fairly popular characters, from my understanding. And I did have to do a considerable amount of research into Genshin Impact to do the to do the voice actor Q&A moderation. And, I mean, that was pretty cool.
Did
I
you
mean,
play Genshin
it's...
Impact?
Yeah, I've put about 4 hours into the game, and I completely understand why people enjoy it, especially like a younger crowd, because it's like completely free. Like you can play that game and not really have to spend any money unless you want to roll for characters, which is entirely optional. And it's also on everything. It's on PC, it's on mobile, it's on PS4. The only thing it's not on is on Switch, so it's very accessible. And again, like I said, it's free. And it's got this huge cast of characters, and, anything like that, there's bound to be, you pick your favorite, you really go for that one. So, I totally get the appeal. I understand where they're coming from. And it's pretty fun. It's nothing groundbreaking. I might play it off and on, down the line, but, I get it. But, yeah, doing
What you're saying is that next year there's going to be a lot of Roblox cosplay.
I mean, I hope so, but they took the oof sound out, so I mean, is there really any reason to play that game anymore?
No.
Exactly. You could call that a big oof.
Maybe Roblox just needs to steal the Breath of the Wild aesthetic like everyone else has, and then everyone would be like, oh, we gotta go play Roblox now.
We can call it oof of the wild.
You just gotta put more waifus, more anime waifus in your Roblox, and there you go. That's all it needs.
But yeah, apart from the Q&As, which I did one, again, like I said, with Tiana Camacho, Brittany Lauda, Matt Shipman. I also did one with Retina and Risa May. And did I do another one? No, I think that was it, just those 4. And they are primarily known...
You were a very busy person. I was
Honestly.
wondering... I was wondering how were you going, especially on Saturday, because it was like, for like 5-6 hours, I'm doing Q&As for all these guests, and I'm doing my own panels, and I get a lunch break.
I mean, Tori knows this. I was texting you during before the last Q&A started, and I was like, oh no, I feel my brain shutting down. It's like the Windows shutdown noise. And I was like, please, can you get me an Advil or something? And thankfully that picks me right up. But, in hindsight, I'm really glad that I did all the content that I did because I got to talk to those cool people. And even if I'm not super personally familiar with their work, just learning about it and talking to them, as actors, as artists, in that setting was very enlightening. And a lot of them are fairly recent to the industry, so it was cool to hear their perspective of, people that have just gotten into this business, within the last couple of years, especially with COVID and remote recording being kind of a new standard for a while. Like Risa May, speaking to her, it's like she had a performing arts background before, but she really didn't get into anime and video game dubbing until like 2020. So like in the midst of the pandemic is where she started her career, and that was really interesting for her. Just to hear, the differences between someone that approached it like that versus, someone that started in the 90s and just never stopped. So I felt very enriched by that experience, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it. My one thing that I wish I was able to do is that I wasn't able to do a Q&A session with Erica Lindbeck, because she was also there at the con, and she's very cool. She's an actress that I really like and appreciate her roles. But we did get to meet her, Tori and I, briefly at her Q&A, or not at her Q&A, like at her autograph table, and that was cool. That was enough. But I guess for my solo panels, I did my Spider-Man panel that I premiered at Animazement, and that went over really well. Again, the 2012 one, and my 10 anime movies thing, which the subject of this podcast is definitely a contender for any time I want to do that panel in the future. But is there anything else that anybody would like to say about Queen City this year?
I can't believe we did all this discussion without mentioning the most important aspect that we saw John Carly for the first time in like 2 years.
Right?
Yes.
Longtime
They-
listeners of this podcast might remember John for being on the first. Well, he was on a lot of our episodes in the early days, but he has not been on an episode since the first season of Demon Slayer that we reviewed, like back in 2019. And basically, after that podcast, he fell off the face of the planet, but we found him. We found him again.
Yeah. He watched Sword for Truth with me for the podcast and said, "No more anime for me. It's this is peak anime. There's nowhere else to go after that."
Is it that, or is it because you fried his brain?
You know, I like to look at it in a positive way. It might have fried his brain. It might have blown his brain. We don't know. We just don't know.
It's a compounding of factors.
Exactly, Austin. Exactly.
Exactly. Okay, any final words on Queen City before we move on to INU-OH?
Nope.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're talking about Masaaki Yuasa's INU-OH. So INU-OH is a 2021 animated feature film that came out here in the US courtesy of G-Kids in the past few weeks or so at the time of this recording, like mid-August 2022. It was directed by the Masaaki Yuasa, a creator that has been really on quite a artistic rampage in the last like 5 or 6 years or so. Like, he was already a pretty known quantity to more niche anime sickos, people like Tobias, of course, for his...
the niche anime sickos that watch Madhouse movies.
Well, I mean, compared to people that only watch Dragon Ball.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Exactly.
You got like Mind Game, Kaiba, yeah.
Exactly. Mind Game, Kaiba, but his stuff, he didn't really break into sort of the more popular consciousness until 2018's Devilman Crybaby on Netflix that exposed his work to a lot more people. So I feel like his name is a lot more popular nowadays, and he's just kind of been on, again, like a creative rampage since then. Like, he released Lou Over the Wall, The Night is Short, Walk On Girl, what else?
Ride Your
Wave. Yep. Even before that, and his studio Science Saru has also been doing quite a lot of amazing things lately. They worked on Star Wars Visions. They did Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken from 2020. They did the recent Heike story adaptation with Naoko Yamada directing that, which will come up later in the episode. So, again, that's kind of the pedigree of where INU-OH is coming from. And this, apparently, is going to be his last film before he retires. But hopefully, if he's anything like Hayao Miyazaki, he will get sick of being retired within a few years and come back and blow us all away once again. I say that in the hopefulness that he's retiring so that he can have a break, and he deserves it. But I would also appreciate him coming back to the industry at some point. I really hope that this is not the end of his career. But anyway, I digress. Yeah. So that's the director, Masaaki Yuasa. Any other thoughts on Yuasa before I move on to the other folks?
I'm just happy.
I think you nailed it. Go ahead, Bill.
Just kind of happy that he's choosing to go out on his own terms and not feeling like he just needs to continue to stay on the hamster wheel that is anime production. So, and there's tons of capable hands at Science Saru. Like currently, I think it's this season. Science Saru is doing Yuri Deco, which I know Tobias has been watching. And they've announced a few other projects, so Science Saru is going to continue to make probably really good work in the near future.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like he's his retirement is not taking the studio down with him. It seems like they've really done a good job at cultivating good talent that will carry on really cool experimental things even after he's kind of stepped down from the company.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen the last of Yuasa completely. I'm glad he's stepping down for all the reasons you guys have given so far, but I get the impression that he needs a really long break at this point. But I don't think he's completely gone forever. My impression, at least.
So the original conceptual character designer for INU-OH is none other than manga legend Taiyo Matsumoto, who is the mangaka for Ping Pong, which was his award-winning manga that got a anime adaptation directed by Yuasa back in the early 2010s or so. And he also did the mangas for Tekkon Kincrete and Number 5, Sunny, and Cats of the Louvre. So he's a very unique manga artist. He has a very specific style. Some people would maybe pin it towards more like, this is going to sound oxymoronic, but like weird realism? I don't know. That's kind of a strange way to put it.
People have a really kind of love-hate with his artwork. You either really love his art or you think his artwork is not great and is a little overhyped. But I think it's unique. It's a different perspective. It's very kind of fluid in his character designs. And I think his artwork is interesting from the stuff I have seen.
He likes characters with bad teeth. That's one thing he really likes.
Always got to bring it back to that, Austin.
And the character designer that adapted his designs into the versions used in the film is Nobutake Ito, was the character designer and the animation director on Kaiba, Lu Over the Wall, Ping Pong, and the Tatami Galaxy. So very much a frequent collaborator with Yuasa and Science Saru more broadly. So the chief animation director on the film is Satoshi Nakano, who was the assistant director on Summertime Rendering, which came out just last season that Bill talked about on our 2022 spring anime season episode that you can go check out right now. He was also the chief animation director on a number of Pokemon movies. And another co-chief animation director is Yoshimichi Kameda, who was an assistant mechanical animator on Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0. He was a character designer and animation director for Mob Psycho 100 seasons 1 and 2, and is the chief animation director of season 3, which will be coming out sometime in the near future. I'm very excited for that, of course. And then the art director for the film overall is Hideki Nakamura, who was the art director for the Studio 4C Berserk Golden Age Arc trilogy films. He also was the art director on Gundam Hathaway's Flash and the Gundam Thunderbolt OVAs. So we've got quite a group of talented folks here working on INU-OH. So Tori, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the folks in the voice cast?
Yeah, so this was actually my favorite when it clicked and I realized what was happening. So INU-OH is voiced by Abu-chan, who is most well known for being the lead vocalist of Queen Bee. And they've been around for a long while, like them as a band. And they did the really good opening song for Dororo 2019. And then the ending song called Half for Tokyo Ghoul Re. They've also done some voice work. They were Devil King Zion and Devilman Crybaby. And they've been in a few live action films. I think their first live action film credit was also with Mirai Moriyama, who plays Tomina, Tomoichi, Tomari, depending on the point in the story. So they've worked together before, and that was really cool to know that. So I'm sure they had fun reuniting and working together on something again. Mirai Moriyama, who, like I said, was Tomona, funny enough, was also Jesus in Saint Young Men. I thought this one was interesting to point out. So INU-OH's dad, the other stage dancer, was played by Kinjiro Suda, who is most known for roles like Nanami in Jujutsu Kaisen, Overhaul in My Hero Academia, and Fire Emblem in Tiger and Bunny. It's a really cool cast, and a lot of the other actors are like long-running live-action actors who not a lot of them, if I remember correctly, have done voiceover work before. So that would be interesting to see how they feel about that. So
I think this
that's the
central
voice cast.
I think these three central characters are probably the ones that get the most like acting time. Like a lot of the other
Yes.
characters, like they're there, but this is really the central cast in terms of like, which characters really move the plot along forward.
For sure.
All right, Tobias. So enlighten us, sort of give us a sort of a historical context for how, like, what is INU-OH? What is kind of the origin of this particular story, and how does it relate to the legend of the Heike or the Heike story?
Yeah, so INU-OH was a real person.
He's still alive to this day.
I don't
say-
think that's true.
Some say he's still dancing under that bridge to this very day. Yeah, so interestingly enough, the movie INU-OH is based on a new novel written by Hideo Furukawa. This author is one of those sort of well-known, up-and-coming Japanese novelists. One of those people that, unlike Murakami, doesn't really have a whole lot of a following outside of Japan, but is quickly up and coming with his more dystopian-themed novels. Like a lot of Japanese novelists, he has done some new translation of older stories. So in 2016, he did a new version of the Heike Monogatari, which is the tale of the Heike clan, following another adaptation of the tale of the Genji clan earlier in that decade. So we would see a few years later, he would do a novel based on a side story from the tale of the Heike called the INU-OH chapter, which is about 160 pages, just a novel based on this character, this almost throwaway character, INU-OH, our dog king. And he gave him a bit of a new spin. So what we do know of INU-OH, who was a real person, we don't really we're pretty sure that he wasn't able to really stretch his arms out and all that kind of stuff. But the real life INU-OH did exist. It was a notable. I'm sorry, notable is probably not the right word. He was a Saragaku, or no performer and writer, but all of his plays have been lost, just like in the movie. The other details that we saw in the movie were definitely fictionalized, however. I don't think there were real ghosts, probably. I don't think there was a real sword that could, cut people in half, maybe. But all of that was sort of added on to that novel and then expanded out even further in this movie itself.
Yeah, that's
so I will say, looking into this, because Furukawa is a novelist that really hasn't made it out of Japan, because if you go to Google or anything and type in INU-OH, all you get are results and reviews for the movie. It was a bit difficult to get any hard information about this guy or this novel. I was able to find a Twitter thread written by Mateo Watsky, writer on the Anime Tudes blog and also a contributor to Fullfronto.moe, who had a really good write-up and the most conclusive write-up that I saw. I'm sure we can put a link to that in the show notes for those of you who want to read that.
Yeah, I saw someone on Twitter also make the comparison, I think mostly kind of as a joke, but I could see where they're coming from. It's like, whereas the Heike story is Hamlet, INU-OH is kind of like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, where it takes like these two side characters from this really famous piece of literature and kind of like makes a whole story about them, which I think is interesting. I mean, the comparison doesn't like one-to-one like line up, because I don't think Tomona is really a character in the Heike story. I think he's more original to Furukawa's novel, but
Right.
I do think that's a interesting way to look at it, if you're familiar with like Hamlet and the spin-off story. But yeah, I think this is a really interesting experiment, but also in a way you don't. I feel, we could talk about this a little bit later, but I feel like you don't really need all that much information going in to enjoy this movie. I think it stands alone pretty well. But before we jump on that, maybe we hold that for a minute. But I guess let's just go ahead and talk generally speaking about what we thought about the film. So I'm going to toss it over to Tori first. What did you think of the movie?
Ooh, yeah. So I really loved it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here doing an episode on it with you guys. Um, I
Tori
was
stomachs
very
us just long enough. Just long enough to talk about a movie.
Yes. I was very captivated from start to finish. And every time I was surprised by something, it would give me something else to be surprised about. It was beautiful. It was gorgeous. The music was really cool and catchy. I was definitely like tapping my foot in the seat to some of those scenes. And yeah, I think it's kind of accessible. Like you were saying, you don't really have to sort of know the history necessarily. It definitely makes me want to learn more about it, but yeah, I don't think you really need to know that to go into it and enjoy it. Yuasa has not made a thing yet that I've been disappointed by, so he's got a great track record, I think.
And if he really is retired, he won't ever make anything that you haven't liked.
Exactly. No, I think he'll pull a Miyazaki and he'll go into retirement for like 3 years and then make something else and then say, okay, I'm going into retirement again and just rinse and repeat. So we'll see.
He's going to make Ponyo next.
Yes.
Oh, he already did that. It's called Lou Over
Wait
the
a
Wall.
minute.
Oh, that's right.
Ponyo, but much better. Better by a factor of like 30.
Yeah.
Bill, what did you think of the movie?
I loved it. Mostly just because of the musical sequences and just how elaborate they were. It was like being at like a peak Queen David Bowie concert with some of the musical performances. I wish I was at a convention premiere for this movie because I think seeing it in a crowd would be a real fun, would be such a fun experience. And I kind of am very happy that this is the movie he kind of went out on because I liked Ride Your Wave. I didn't love it. I think that's if I had to pick my least favorite of his works. But no, I just for the music alone, it really blew me away, and I didn't really have any nitpicks other than the ending, which I guess we'll get into a bit later. But overall, I really liked it.
Now, the reason I asked those two first is that I felt like Tobias was going to have maybe a slightly deviating perspective if you haven't evolved since the last time I talked to you about it, which I don't know. So what are your thoughts? What did you think of INU-OH, Tobias?
Yeah, I get to be the bad guy, don't I?
I guess
me
so.
for last. Well, if
I mean, unless you want me to go first, and then you can really go last.
No, that's fine. As I'm sure our devoted listeners will know, because they all subscribe to our Discord, which you should do if you haven't already. I was a little down on the movie right when I saw it last week. I think for whatever reason, I didn't walk away loving this movie. I didn't dislike it. I don't think there's any complaints really. When I think about it, everything comes together more or less. I just didn't walk away loving this movie the same way that I did Lou Over the Wall or Night is Short or really anything else of Yuasa's work. And I think there's a lot to be said about hype and advertising and all of that being amplified via social media, being in the middle of a global pandemic that nobody knows they're going to survive. However, putting that all in context, I don't think there's really a big nitpick I can have. There are points I think where it doesn't really come together all that great. It seems like there's a lot of disparate parts. The historical context, it's just set dressing for the rock opera itself. But even then, it can be a little confusing, until you stop to really think about it and put it all together like a big puzzle. I don't know. I mean, I like the themes. I genuinely think what it has to say about nonconformity, what it has to say about speaking truth to power, and what I think it has to say about the idea of rock music and the devil music and kids these days, I think all come together really well and make it all feel relevant in an eternal sense. It's not just something that's a new thing.
They're all growing
their kind of been there.
They're all growing their hair out, and they smell like prostitutes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's something. Well, it's something I have to think about. And if nothing else, I think a movie that makes me stop to think, that will make my opinion evolve over time, is a much better movie. The one that I just love immediately and always love.
I think the hype train got you, and
I mean, it definitely did. It definitely did. I as soon as this movie got announced, like at the end of 2019, 2020, something like that, I immediately was on board for this. And I think having to wait 2 years, again, there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, movies take time to make. I'm not trying to say they should have crunched or anything. I think my expectation was skewed, however, and just further skewed because of desperately wanting something new, in the middle of all the hellscape that was 2020, kind of offset it a bit. And I have nobody to blame for that. Nobody to blame for that myself,
Well, it's funny because I went into this movie rather cold. Like, I knew this was a Yuasa movie. This is something he'd been working on, but I wasn't following it on Twitter, or I didn't see the trailer. I just knew it was a Yuasa thing, and I knew I liked his prior stuff, so I'm gonna go see it. And I think going in more cold probably helped me like this movie more.
Yeah,
I definitely see that.
Yeah,
sure.
I had a similar experience because, like you, I mean, I've been following Yuasa's work for a number of years, but like whenever they announced this one, like for some reason, I just like completely turned my brain off of to it. Probably because, and this is a very shallow reason, it didn't have a great poster. Like I wasn't really.
Oh my god!
I wasn't really down for the poster. Like compare it to like his other stuff, which are so striking with like colors and vibrant character designs. Like this was a very abstract poster that basically just had the gourd mask on it, and I was just like, okay, you know what? I'm not gonna really bother getting super excited for this. I'm just gonna wait for it to come out. And I think I saw one of the trailers once, like maybe in front of another Fathom event or something, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm still gonna go see this. Still excited for it, but I had a hard time really understanding what I was looking at, so I just kind of ejected it from my mind and didn't really try and form an opinion until I got there. So all that to say, I really enjoyed it because I think I tampered my own expectations for it. And I think having been able to see it twice, because I saw it once with Tori and another time with Tobias, really made me appreciate some of the things that I was a little bit more confused by, especially in the first act, because the first act feels like a little bit kind of like a lot of context, a lot of things that are very, very like serious and very different than like acts 2 and 3, which is, I mean, I guess you could make that criticism to the work overall, that like act 1 is like very slow and downplayed compared to the rest of the film, which is just like basically an hour-long musical. Like the first act is very, very different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was a little bit taken aback by that the first time I watched it, but riding the high of the musical parts that really kick in Act 2 and come to a head in Act 3, like that's the part of the movie that made me think, okay, this was really, really fun, really enjoyable. So I just walked away from the film having mostly very positive feelings towards the whole thing overall, which is great.
I think another problem that I had was that when we went to go see this in the theater here in Winston-Salem, for whatever reason, the sound system never really hit the volume that I was hoping for. I guess it was just a theater thing, because like I was waiting. I knew when the music started it was going to be nothing but that. I was aware of that, but something about, I guess, the volume didn't really hit enough. I guess it just wasn't a great, maybe an older theater we were in. I can't really say, but I was expecting, you go see another movie, a musical movie, you can feel the sound waves, reverberating around you. And that's what I was really hoping for here, and didn't really get that in that theater. So maybe when the home release comes out, I'll have to put on my headphones and make myself go even more deaf listening to this movie.
Well, I guess, kind of getting our initial reactions out of the way, like, what did we think of the story of the film? Like, it kind of starts off, we're introduced to our first main character, Tomona, in sort of like a ghastly flashback at the very beginning that pays off towards the end. But then you see him, as a little kid with his dad, and like this sort of ghost-based accident happens to them where his dad ends up dying, and then he goes blind, and then
It's
he
like a mystical sword. Like they are commissioned to
yeah
find this well-known sword without the land, and when they find it, if I remember correctly, they take it out of its sheath, and then some magical light beam just goes throughout where they are, killing his father and blinding him.
And really, I think that just served as like an indication that like, oh, the Heike spirits are an active force. But really, I thought that scene mostly just set up the fact that, you know, our main character is blind now because of this accident, and his father is dead, so he's kind of like an orphan because his mother kind of like goes off the rails after this accident happens, and he has to leave town and everything. And he and I thought one thing that was really fascinating was the way that they depicted how he sees the world without eyesight. It's like whenever you're seeing things from Tomana's perspective, it's very this is kind of a silly way to compare it, but you guys remember the 2003 Daredevil movie where like it's raining and then he sees the shapes of things? Yeah, it's like
Yes.
it's kind of like that, but better. Better in the sense that like, no, it's not a perfect image based on the sounds that he sees. It's still very fuzzy, but you
it's
get
the point that Yuasa can use to give it a more surreal look.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then that comes in handy for the plot later on, because it kind of, it's the catalyst for why he doesn't react to INU-OH the way that most people react to INU-OH. So yeah, our main character, he becomes like a protege of this Biwa priest, who, if you're not familiar with Biwa priests, they're basically like Buddhist. Are they like Buddhist or Shinto priests that like play the biwa, and that's like their main thing that they do? I don't know. They probably do a lot more than that, but that's kind of their purpose in the film.
I'm pretty sure it's Buddhist.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So yeah, he becomes like a biwa protege underneath this elderly biwa priest who is also blind, and then, you know, they move to the capital of Kyoto and join a troupe there, and then sort of we shift perspectives to INU-OH, our secondary main character, who we kind of find out is like this kid who was cursed before he was born and basically turned into this horrible monster.
His story is very similar to Dororo in that the father in Dororo and the father here basically gave their son away, and their body and soul of their son away, to this demon-like creature for them to be prosperous. And then the being of their sons come back, and then kind of as vengeance, not on purpose, but as vengeance to what their fathers had done, begin to cause misfortune to them.
And that is kind of to make that Dororo comparison. It is interesting because like Dororo's journey is about like going out to basically like find the demons that his father sacrificed his body parts to, and like killing them to get them back. But INU-OH is kind of like a subversion of that, because whereas Dororo is very like revenge minded, INU-OH doesn't. You never really feel like INU-OH is out for revenge, or that he's
just vibing and having a good time.
Yeah, which is really interesting, because, you know, he has every right and every reason to feel like bitter towards his father that did this to him, sort of made him an outcast by like turning him into this monster that like cannot interact with people. But he kind of spins that and is just like, you know what, if I get my limbs back, that's really cool because I can dance better, or something like that. It's like he's not angry. which I thought was really interesting. But did you guys have any thoughts on that? Because that's one thing that really stood out to me.
So we see him characterized pretty early on. He's certainly not angry directly at his family, but he learns to use his body to sort of get power over the people around him. We see him as soon as he gets his legs, he runs through the town, starts scaring people, running around, taking his mask off to scare people. That's how he gets his kicks, just running around and getting one up on these people in some way until he meets
Tomona.
I was gonna say Biwa, the character from Make a Story, but
right. He plays the Biwa.
Yeah.
He is not Biwa.
Yeah, before he meets Tomona, and his initial arc is he's a better dancer, a better no dancer than his brothers are.
Mm-hmm.
But even though he doesn't have that training, he's automatically better than them. So he's not really braggy about it or anything, but he certainly wants to express himself.
Mm-hmm.
He break dances.
That is his motivation.
He does.
He break dances.
Yes.
Which a really fun sequence where he basically has like a monstrous hand in the beginning, and we learn as he begins to perform, he becomes more and more normal. But at first, he's basically like this sort of monstrous figure with a giant hand, and begins to dance at first.
And he keeps his face covered like a bit like Phantom of the Opera style by this like gourd mask that he wears. And like you said, like he's running around town whenever he gets his legs, which the way that it works in the film is that like he does these dances, and then his like the spirits of the Heike warriors like that are around him like grant him his human limbs back, because they see him as helping them to tell their story through song and dance, which is exactly kind of what no theater kind of is in the broad sense. It's like passing down the stories. So they're kind of like smiling on him and giving them these blessings in the form of like getting rid of his curse. So he feels like, well, dancing is like the way that he expresses himself, and B, a great way to like get this curse off of him. But he never approaches it in a way where he's just like lamenting his situation, I guess. I mean, he does a bit. He obviously recognizes that he's different than people and wishes people would treat him normally. But he kind of uses his gifts to his advantage instead of like being bitter or being mean. And like most of the time in that scene where he's like running around scaring people, it's obviously just for kicks. Like he's not doing it in a malicious way.
He ultimately learns, like many artists, to sublimate his trauma into art.
Exactly. And like the scene where he meets Tomona is like very, very, very predictable within the context of what the movie has set up so far. It's like the monster meets the blind man, very much like in the original Frankenstein, where they have an understanding of each other because like the monster doesn't his appearance scares people, but the blind man, he can't see him, so he only judges him by his personality. So they kind of form a camaraderie that way. And since they both have this sort of mutual appreciation for music, they basically start a band together.
How different this movie would be if INU-OH just wasn't a big fan of the biwa.
Right.
Maybe he would be more of an EDM kind of guy.
That's your boy Kong Ming. That's a different show.
Oh, right.
If they had a rap sequence in INU-OH, I would have been like,
oh my god.
It's like it's confirming again, it's the year of the rap and anime.
I think we're on prog rock now, Bill.
But yeah, I mean that's generally the setup, and then the movie just kind of goes from there. And INU-OH puts on these incredible performances, and he gets known sort of in the underground, and lots of people get drawn to his performances, and they keep getting more and more elaborate. As he does them, the Heike spirits sort of heal his curse as he tells their story, but eventually that comes into conflict with the new shogun, who only wants certain stories told, which adds another layer to the story. But I've talked a lot. Is there any other directions you guys would be interested in exploring?
Uh, just the elaborateness of the concert sequences where initially it's just the two of them on a bridge, and then it becomes like a full on arena rock show with like a crew and elaborate fireworks and elaborate screen projection
Mm-hmm.
with multiple people in the band. Like it just keeps expanding and expanding and expanding. Where to the point where if this was like in modern day, they'd be performing at like Madison Square Garden or the O2 Arena or Dodger Stadium with how big
Mm-hmm.
they were getting. And just I kind of just love the elaborateness that we see of the concert sequences of just the stagecraft of it all.
I was gonna say it got bigger every time, and like more set pieces were involved. And by the end of it, it was just like how are you gonna top this? And then he did, and it was incredible.
I did appreciate that, even though this is an anime, headed by a person who's very good at doing surreal stuff, all of those sets had practical, quote unquote, effects. Like the first one we see, the barrel mount arms, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like you can kind of watch and see all the effects and the rope work they've done to set everything up, and it all works. It's not like it made fantastical at all. It's an actual living set, which is pretty cool.
Mm.
Yeah, that was definitely a neat touch because, there are some things that are certainly embellished, like the fact that all of their biwa playing sounds like, arena rock, and, obviously there's no electricity, so they can't have amps and things like that. But like some of the effects that they come up with, like the hands made out of straw with string attached to them, and like the big projection of the whale during the whale scene, is all stuff that like it might be a little bit embellished, but kind of effects that probably could have been done in some way or another in 1400s Japan. I think one central thing, and we kind of touched on this a little bit already, is sort of the central sort of hook of the whole film revolves around like the relationship between Tomona and INU-OH and sort of their friendship, their partnership as the film goes along. Like it's very much like these two underground artists sort of against the world, trying to sort of make a name for themselves, but really put art at the forefront of everything, and seeing sort of what kind of sacrifices they have to go through to get there.
And then one sells out to the man. At the very
Yeah,
end.
Yes.
that's definitely something to talk about.
I really like their relationship and their dynamic, and watching their appearances change as the movie went on.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And kind of how they grew closer and brought out each other's creativity and things like that. So, I don't know. I feel like, what do I want to say? I wish the movie had been like just a smidge longer so we could have gotten a little bit more of that, or this had even been like, I don't know, a longer running show or something. Because I really liked the two of them together.
I did too, and they had such unique contexts for each of their lives and where they were coming from. Like
Yes.
like Tomona comes from, he's kind of this poor boy, like very working class, like son of a fisherman, and
They
then
were divers.
divers. Yeah, okay, thank
Yeah.
you. And like his dad is now dead, but also following him around as a ghost, which was really fun. But his dad, even from beyond the grave, insists that like, no, you need to retain your name so that I'm able to find you, because for some reason I can't move on to the next life. But that ends up being in conflict with what Tomona really wants to do, because first he feels this draw towards becoming a biwa priest, and part of the requirements for the troupe that he wants to join is that he has to change his name from Tomona to Tomoichi to take on the sort of the suffix of the leader of the troupe. And his dad from beyond the grave was like, no, if you take on that name, I can't find you. But Tomona's just like, this is what I want to do, so I kind of have to. So it's sort of that thing that we all have to run into of like, when do we separate from, the powers that raised us and sort of go out and do our own thing, which is very, very
Mhm.
Well,
exemplified.
isn't it also kind of a commentary on tradition
Yeah,
of
very much
the
so.
the, the parents wanting you to follow in your footsteps, whether that be in your career or in certain aspects of your name. That's a very
Hmm.
important thing of like, will you pass on my name to your child
Hmm.
going forward? So it's kind of the same thing as
Hmm.
to keep my legacy alive, maintain my name. And it's like most kids, we want to rebel and we want to set our own path, and that's what he's trying to do, is kind of find his own path. And I think the great thing about the two leads' relationship is they're both misfits,
Hmm.
and them finding each other and just liking each other for their quirks,
Hmm.
like not judging them of like, oh, you're blind, or oh, you're a weird looking monster. Just no, you're pretty cool. We should hang out.
Yeah. We should make art together.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, this movie's definitely, absolutely playing with like identity here. We've got this kid and he has one name, and then when his life is thrown asunder and he starts a new chapter, he changes his name again, and then even then it becomes like too complacent in that role, and he sees his mentor and the community around him being fine with just sitting on their thumbs and telling the old stories. There's no invention happening, and he becomes so frustrated by this and meets someone, a fellow, let's be honest, a fellow freak that is into new stuff, weird stuff,
Hmm.
that he wants to change it even more and changes his name once again to Tamari at the end. And not only invents this new style of music, as we see, he starts dressing completely differently. And again, sort of the rock glam, hair music, hair rock sort of stylings. He's commented by several people through the movie that he looks different, his music's different, everything is different about him. I mean, it's very much about not just tradition, like Bill was saying. That's definitely a part of it, but it's a matter of telling a story about who you are and expressing yourself in whatever way is comfortable to you. And yeah, it's absolutely playing with gender here as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you could absolutely put the trans perspective lens on this movie
Hmm.
because it's a movie about bodily transformation.
Hmm.
You're choosing a new name, and they have development of their physical appearance and identities as the movie progresses. So
Hmm.
that is sticks out very much.
Hmm.
It is no accident that Abu-chan was chosen for INU-OH's voice actor.
Yeah.
No
Oh
accident
yes.
at all here.
Oh
That is,
yes.
yeah, I did. I don't. I'm not going to put words in Yuasa's mouth and say he's definitely telling a trans story here, but you kind of can't not see it. And it's
Yeah.
not just transgender specifically. It is all of that sort of self-expression, self-identity.
Hmm.
It is choosing this for yourself. Breaking through tradition, breaking through norms, even some of the more controlling norms in society, and telling your story. And that's really their thing at the end. We talk about breaking INU-OH's curse or just being a bebop player, but really what it's about is they want to make their mark on this world in ways that they wouldn't be able to by following the rules. And that is
Right.
exactly why they do all this.
I did think, kind of in contrast a little bit to what we were talking about bucking tradition. One thing I did think that was really kind of sweet and a little bit unexpected considering the story that we had so far is that, like, whenever it comes to the ending and we have the sequence where basically the Shogun decides, oh, we already have all the Heike stories that we want to tell. We are going to forbid any new Heike stories from being told, and that includes the performances of Tomare and INU-OH. So if they want to perform, that's outlawed, and we'll kill them. And like,
I only wanted to put this concert on because my wife liked you, so I gave this as a present to my wife, and that's it.
right, basically, like the Shogun's wife was big into INU-OH. They let him do one last performance, and then the Shogun was like, "Nah, you're just gonna dance for me from now on." But anyway, like Tomoari goes back to the Biwa priests, and they in their own way, they kind of welcome him back into the fold. They're just like, we care about you. We understand that, like, you may be on a path that we don't necessarily agree with, but we're not going to shun you. Like, we're going to welcome you back. It has
You
to
went
be
through
on
a
our
phase.
terms. Yeah, they were like, well, it has to be on our terms, because if it's not, the Shogun's going to kill you. But I did think that was interesting. Like, he doesn't, like, completely and totally get dropped by the people, like, in the Biwa troop just because he decided to do something different. It's like they were still willing to kind of, like, show that they cared for him, even if he did something that they didn't agree with. To the point that his mentor even, like, jumps in front of the knife and gets killed, because they're trying to execute him. I just thought that was really interesting. And it's not really the type of scene that you typically see in something that's, like, about breaking with authority.
Well, that elder Biwa player is basically an adopted father figure.
Right.
And,
Right.
like, he knew him since he was a kid. So he's bound to have protective feelings of,
Mm-hmm.
I've taken care of this boy who's now a man since he was a young child, so I will bring him back into the fold. I will protect him.
Yeah, and I just think that adding that layer to it sort of shows Yuasa's willingness to have complex narratives rather than, like, black and white stories.
No, but for sure, we already get a lot of the political machinations through the court itself. The Biwa priest, they're really just fellow musicians. They've been with him the whole time. They're not really there to play the politics necessarily. In fact, I don't think they even have really even that power. They're not given the same. He talks to Inu's father, and leads him in on this scam, the plot to stop and destroy INU-OH. And the priests aren't really part of that. They're not really given that power. They're not really acknowledged to have any power. They're just there to play their music. And really it comes down to just fellow creatives working together. They may not agree with this new fashioned devil music that it was playing, but it's still, there's still a camaraderie there.
Right.
I get the impression that the Biwa priests really aren't a growing industry at the time. Probably far from it. Yeah, I mean, going into the sort of the political, we'll talk about the political machinations, but so much of this is tied up into the Heike clan and whatever the new version of that with the shogun here. So much of this movie is about the established order being decided in courts and through murder plots and assassination plots on the sideline. The people in power do not care about their subjects at all. They're there to rule and to keep that order. And we see that's the real struggle of this movie, is just change versus the established order in a way that's not even just tradition necessarily, but people actively trying to keep their power.
Right.
In a sort of a non-militaristic fashion.
Mm-hmm. And that also trickles down to INU-OH's father, because, like, the reason he wants to be, like, the gold standard, like the only standard of performance art for the shogun and for the elites, is because that's what makes him most comfortable. Like, if he doesn't have to compete against anyone else, then by default he is he's going to be the king of his little song and dance empire. And he's so obsessed with that like in the beginning, like we've said before, like he sacrifices his unborn child to this demon mask, basically. And it's just like, yeah, if this is what will keep me in power, this is what I will do. And then ultimately that ends up being his downfall. But again, it's kind of to your point of, like, everybody is there's so many different players in this chess game, all vying for, their piece of the pie, and everybody else can go F off.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of moving parts here. You mentioned the Act 1 just being so tonally different than the rest of the movie. I would really recommend, if you don't want to go back and read the original story, then Science Saru's anime television series, Haiken Monogatari, that just came out a few years back, is a great comparison to this, a great companion work to this, just because it goes over a lot of the stuff that came before, and you see a lot of the same machinations. You have the original Tidre clan as this force that just does not care about their subjects, that is just there to play the court game, the Game of Thrones, if you will. So if you want to see more of that, I would definitely recommend checking that out to tie into this here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, watching INU-OH definitely has inspired me. Like, I was already watching the Heike story, like, kind of off and on, but watching this has definitely inspired me to want to go back and finish it up.
Yeah. And we see the beginning of the Battle of Danora, where you talk about the grass cutter sword that we mentioned. Like, that entire thing was originally, they tied it up in the story of sending the young prince down to the Dragon Island or something, and under the water. Really just a matter of getting rid of this child emperor, like killing the child emperor with the sword. And then now we see the new shogunate, they want that sword as a emblem of their power, which is why they hire Tomoana and his father initially to begin with. It's more or less said that they had no intention of paying them. They were going to kill them one way or another. It just so happened that the sword did that work for them. So this need for power, this lust for power, affects everyone around them, even the little people they hire. It keeps the Biwa priest down. You mentioned INU-OH's father, and so much of that is tied into his rival. We see his rival perform for the shogun, and is the best no dancer around, and he wants that position for himself. He wants that recognition for himself. And again, it's a matter of who's in power, who has that power, and who wants to keep that power. That plays into this movie so well.
And it shows it in good contrast too for like INU-OH and Tomoari's performances, because it seems like for the most part they just want to perform for the sake of it, like perform for the sake of the art. And like INU-OH is happy that he's able to get his body parts back and everything. Like he gets returned to normal, the curse is lifted. But it seems like if I'm reading on it correctly, he would do that anyway because of just the joy of making art compared to these other people who are in it for personal gain.
It's very much a matter of that expression and getting that audience. We see that the people around don't necessarily go out of their way to see the Biwa players. The no performances are given pretty much just for the nobility. They're not really something that the common people enjoy in this movie. So then when you're going about your daily business and someone is, playing Queen on the bridge, talking about a performance, you can see for free if you just walk under the bridge. Yeah, of course you're going to get the attention of the people and win hearts and minds a lot better than you would just by saying so.
And one of my favorite sequences was just like after their first big performance where they do the funeral mound of arms or something. There's just that sequence, that montage of like all the people in town, all the regular folks just talking about how cool that performance was, or like, did you guys hear about this INU-OH guy? Like, he's so cool, and like we're gonna go see him perform. And that's this very grassroots thing rather than something that the people in power are trying to impose. But I think we've very well covered our point on that one. But Bill, you had some misgivings a bit with the ending that I think some of us might share in some way or another. But go ahead and lay that on us. Like, what's your beef with the ending?
Just it was such after such a high of the third performance, it felt so disappointing that the ending is kind of ends on a whimper of like the emperor decides like, nope, we're gonna stick with the old stories. These new stories are no longer allowed, and INU-OH basically agrees that I will only perform for you, and that what I did before is done, and that his friend basically tries to say nope and shut it down, and I was fine with all that. My problem is just kind of like that gets resolved in its sad ending, and then they fast forward like a millennia later to where he's a ghost and they meet up again and be like, let's perform again. And it felt just kind of like a quiet ending to me. I think I would have, after being on such a high from the musical performance, I kind of wish it was like no, we're gonna go out like a Viking ship and do one last performance, and we're going to die performing. That I think that's what I would have preferred, but I kind of get what they were trying to do of just like, well, the man or the conformity will usually win out in the end. So I can kind of see his point, and I guess just the emotional high from the third performance was so good that the ending felt like such a whimper to me that it was like, oh man. I was just kind of like, did it have to end that way? Like I get it now, thinking about it, because it's a commentary on like the powerful forces that be usually winning out, and you're not always going to get your happy ending. You aren't always going to be the identity that you want to be, unfortunately, due to external factors beyond your control, which sucks. But I guess I would have just liked them to go out like a Viking death ship and do one last performance.
Yeah, what do you guys make of that? Because, like, I can understand the ending that we have, but I think Bill's would have really hammered home that sort of anti-establishment theme that they were going for. But you could also do a reading of like, oh, well, in the end, INU-OH just sold out and Tomoari, like, died. Like, INU-OH definitely got the better end of the stick in that regard, but he also sold out. So,
but he's also forgotten. He's also forgotten, they say in the postscript, where we don't. Right. No one remembered him. Mm-hmm. So did he really win?
That's a good question. I mean, arguably no, but I mean, he did get to survive, I guess. So I don't know. It's complicated. So what do you guys think?
I took it as him trying to protect his friend, which unfortunately was kind of for nothing because, you know, Tomoari didn't give up and got himself killed because he didn't want to give up what made him happy and what he felt like he was made to do. And I feel like you could read the scene of INU-OH kind of like putting his head down and popping back up and being in that like very fake like, oh yes, I'm here for you, blah blah blah, whatever. I mean, that really changes depending on what lens you're looking at everything under, for sure. To me, I don't know if we're still doing like a trans or gender themed reading. To me, that kind of reads as like, you know, maybe compulsory heteronormativity, my god, that was a mouthful, is not necessarily what I'm trying to get at, but just like hiding who you are and like not being open about your identity and things like that to kind of like not rock the boat and blend in just enough to kind of like fit in within the normality, quote unquote normality of things. But at the end of the day, I just think he was trying to protect Tomoari, and unfortunately, like I said, I feel like it was kind of wasted because he got killed anyway. But that scene was really incredible when he was like, no, my name's Tomona, and then right in the middle of it got decapitated. Was just powerful to me, at least. I don't know, like admitting who you are and like who you've always been to everyone around you is a big deal, you know what I mean? And I do agree it would have been really cool to have seen them do like a rock performance to the death and, you know, stick it to the man one last time and go down in a blaze of glory, but like sometimes you gotta do what you just gotta do to survive, and that doesn't always work out the way you plan for it to. I liked the reuniting in the end. I don't know, it made my heart happy. I was just like, yes, the boyfriends are back together and can like float off into the sky and make music together and they'll be together forever. And I don't know if that's how I personally would have ended it, but I don't think I was necessarily dissatisfied. It just would have been cool to maybe see it take a different route, if any of that made sense.
Would you say, Tori, that perhaps Inuo never actually took off his mask at the end? Well, in the sense that, he was told to keep his head down to guard his friend. Finally, after revealing his face for the first time ever, but then having to put on a happy face for the sake of keeping the normality.
Yeah, I know. You could. Yeah, absolutely. Keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I mean,
no. I mean, that's kind of that's really what's going on here. I mean, I don't think you could ever make the reading that Inuo was sold out, because it's not, do this or we will kill you. It is do this or we will kill the only person that's ever understood you.
Yeah.
The Shogun really understands how to manipulate people, and that's put your friends in danger, put their friends in danger, rather, to guide them. So that's exactly what he did. And what it comes down to is the two leads made separate choices. Tomo Tomari decided that this is the most important to me, that being Tomari, that performing this music is the only way I have purpose, which is why he rejects being told, even when his elder is killed in front of him. He continues to fight until his last moments, that this is me, this is my expression. I will do this, and the fascists in power will have to kill me to stop me. That's it. And Inuo doesn't, his stakes aren't personal. His stakes are, we're going to kill your friends. So he keeps his head down and does so. But ultimately, it's the same result. He's forgotten about his identity, everything that he's done. His entire output is squashed. And the entire ending, the last scene we see where they're meeting in modern times, it's pretty much them looking at the audience and saying, this could happen to you.
Yes.
This entire movie ties into, this is going on right now. This is not a historical play about one particular thing. These are themes of power and politics that will continue to reverberate throughout time, and you can choose to fight against that order and be yourself and ensure that security for being yourself, or you can give in to these easy choices and be forgotten about. And there's one quote from Yuasa I want to say here. When speaking out the movie, he said, "It is also a story of life today, whether to align with fate and fashion, to seize glory, or to forego reward to live according to your beliefs. The two offer recompense to the defeated by telling their stories," and the two here we're talking about Inuo and Tamari. The two offer recompense to the defeated by telling their stories, and this film offers the same to them in kind.
Hey folks, Editing Austin here. Unfortunately, my internet cut out, so you won't hear me for the rest of the episode. And it cut out right in the middle of Tobias reading that quote, so he doesn't actually get to finish it. It was kind of a weird Wi-Fi day, that entire recording, but thankfully we made it work for the most part, but it did give up the ghost eventually. Anyways, sorry about that, and here's the rest of the episode. Hope you enjoy.
I think if this is truly Yuasa's last film, I think he went out with making something really unique. I love the, hopefully, intentionality of the casting choices here. The songs are stuck in my head. It's literally Ride Your Wave 2.0. Like, every time I think about it, one of those songs plays in my head. And even though I think it kind of needs a little bit to get its footing in that first act, I think everything else to me pays off so well that just, I don't know, this is definitely one of my favorite movies that I've watched in a while, and I don't want to hype it up too much, but I think, any director would be really lucky to put out something like this, and you also just knocked it out of the park. So watch INU-OH, it's real good.
Exactly. And unfortunately, we're going to have to wait to do that again. It was a limited release. I'm sure the Blu-ray will come out. I'm sure they'll do that.
It'll come out in a few months. It'll probably come out in a few months. Just like Fortune Favors
Lady Nikuko,
which was a limited release thing, but that just recently got a Blu-ray release. So
Exactly. Like I said, I'm definitely gonna have to watch this with the headphones on just to get the full impact of everything again. I think The Whale was my favorite um, song from the entire thing. Something about just hearing that Queen, infamous Queen beat pop up with "We Will Rock You" alongside the story and the visual effects they had going with it. I was really in that moment and felt like I was watching that performed in front of me, and that was really powerful.
Yes.
This time, I loved all the concert sequences. I felt like I was at a concert watching the movie in the theater. When it was just me, my brother, and two other people. Um,
Yeah.
I wish again that I was seeing this in a large group because I think that would have been such a fun experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like I said before, I'm happy Uwasa's going out on his own terms, and hopefully he won't get too bitter and be like, "Someone's doing something so surreal that's amazing. I need to come back and beat them." Just,
Yes.
just like, just like Miyazaki's response to Your Name.
Right. I know we lost Austin because his internet dropped out and is not coming back, but I'm still gonna ask this question anyway. What were your guys' favorite scenes? Curious.
Scenes. Well, I liked The Whale as my favorite set piece, but as individual scenes,
I think my favorite, and I can think of off the top of my head, is the third performance when it looks like he's skating across the water,
Oh my
and
gosh,
just
yes.
all the colors. They're just like, oh, it's so pretty, so pretty.
I think for me, it's probably a toss up of when we see giant baby Inuo in the womb and he starts becoming cursed and weird and was not expecting a giant baby to be there. That really caught me off guard, I'm not gonna lie.
Were you having Death Stranding flashbacks?
No, it was giving me oh gosh, Resident Evil Village vibes when you're being chased by the giant weird baby monster. I think that was that game. I think that's right. That or the ending. I really liked the ending. It was just heartwarming to me, even though, maybe that wasn't the intended message, but they were reunited. That was good to me. So,
I really like
yeah.
the part where in the same scene with the baby where his dad explodes in a
Oh
shower of
my
blood
gosh,
and
we didn't even
gore.
talk about that.
Where we kind of find out what his backstory is, and the mask shows up. He's like, you know what? Well, screw you too, pal, and just blows him up.
Yes, oh my gosh.
The Medora basically it looks like the mask from Madora's Mask.
Yeah, it was really creepy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of my favorite scenes. I keep coming back to some of the beginning stuff, the Act One stuff, and there's the one scene where we see all the boats on the river, and the entire scene is laid out almost like a painting or a scroll, almost, where it's not really given complete concrete form. We just see a lot of these boat-like shapes on this river-like shape with these white and red flags against each other. That something about that I really can't say. It just kind of strikes me in a sort of stylistic way. I think it's kind of great. I think my sort of final thoughts on the movie as a whole, my takeaway is again, Yuasa is trying to say here, and hell, even Furukawa, the original novelist, is trying to say here that this is not just history. This is not something you just read about. This is a story about actual living, breathing people that can be repeated and will be repeated, both the good and the bad. Again, this does not exclude you, dear viewer, at all. That you need to take these stories to heart and do what you need to do to express yourself and rise up if need be. A lot of those acts aren't easy. They're not the most comfortable thing to do, but if you don't do it, then those decisions will be made for you. Not always the best way. All right, well, we can give sort of our final social media preamble here. Austin can add in a lot of the website stuff, but
Hello, I'm back again. Our website is thirdimpactanime.com, and you can go over there to find an archive of all of the many episodes we've done over the years. You can also find links to our sub-shows, Kotatsu Corner and A Grand Line Reborn. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can check us out over on Patreon, and that's patreon.com/thirdimpactanime. You can also find us over on Twitter at TI_anime and on Instagram at thirdimpactanime. If you're listening to this show on a podcatcher that allows you to either rate podcasts or give reviews, please consider doing either one of those. That would really help out the visibility of the show, and it would put a nice little smile on our faces. Okay, that's all. I'm gone again. Bye-bye.
Let's say, Bill, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at WB Foreman, with 3 9s, where I'm now playing Final Fantasy XIV. It's a miracle, I know.
It goes.
You know, just the power of One Piece can make me do a lot of things. So we'll probably be talking about my experience with 14 and Tobias' experience with One Piece in a Katatsu episode down the road. So I'm looking forward to that. And if you want to hear more of my voice for some reason, you can hear me host the massive Spring 2022 episode that I did with Tobias and Sarah. A lot of fun, and reminded me that I was a crazy person that season and watched too many shows.
And if you're wondering why the hell Bill is once again talking about One Piece, but also Final Fantasy XIV this time, you would know this if you were on our Discord. So go ahead and find the link either in the show notes or on our website, thirdimpactanime.com. Join the conversation and follow along on both our journeys with this manga series and this video game. But Tori, where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, I've been taking a little break from social media just to kind of recharge, but I'm where yes, I am where I always am, and that's over on Twitter at Worst Waifu. I haven't really been watching anything but some K-dramas and not tweeting about them, and I've been playing iSomnium Files and also not tweeting about that, so that's where I am right now.
Good for you.
Yeah.
We definitely need to do a Kotatsu corner. We talk about that and like 999 and that author's other stuff. I know Ryan's a big fan as well.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, and I guess if you want to follow me online, you can do that as well. I am at Reverend_Tobias on the Bird site. And that's pretty much it for us.
Fun times was had by all at the rock concert.